Charles Leclerc was behind Carlos Sainz in drivers standing for the whole season until the very last weekend, where he managed to outscore him and actually beat him in a teammate duel. Qualifying was the crucial part of this success, so let's break down and compare qualifying laps of Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Charles, they're crossing the start-finish line, and let's go. Start-finish line is actually pretty short on Yas Marina circuit, and we will see that Charles will brake earlier than Carlos Sainz. Not a huge difference, but still a difference, and we're moving on towards the apex, similar speeds. As for now, Carlos is a bit in front of Charles, but Charles is earlier on throttle. He should have a better exit out of the corner. And we see at this point they're actually at exact same spots, with Charles having a higher speed, so he will continue to have some advantage in comparison to Carlos. Now, Carlos is pressing the brakes, just a tiny, small security press, as I may call it. He may didn't even notice it himself. He picks up a little bit of a slipstream and they enter first heavy braking zone and they finish the first sector. Now Charles have a 3/100ths of a second advantage over Carlos. We can barely see it on the camera, but what we can say is a huge difference in braking points at around 15 meters maybe. Actually, Carlos braking later coincides with his driving style. He likes a bit of an understeer, but was he braking too late? That's actually the main question, and we see that he actually was braking too late. He struggles to make the apex, he falls a bit off the grip, and we see as for now he is way slower and he is not on the throttle in comparison to Charles Leclerc. So braking later is actually not every time being faster, especially in the modern F1 cars. So we see Charles making a small correction. In classical Charles style, he always relies on his hands, on his fast reaction to make a correction in order to not go off the throttle and in order to lose as less time as possible. He basically loses nothing here. Once again, Carlos manages to pick some slipstream out of a slow car, and we enter the braking zone for turn 6. As for now, we already see Carlos is way behind, so we will drag him towards Charles, and we will see that Carlos again will brake a bit later, but the question is still the same. Isn't it too late to brake for Carlos? Will he actually make it to the apex? And he once again fails to make it to the apex. He goes a little bit off, which will mess his line throughout the whole corner. Charles will have a good, smooth line with smaller distance traveled, with ability to carry more speed, but Carlos will actually travel more distance and will have a narrower entrance into the next corner, which will harm his exit speed. So lots of time can actually be lost down here. We already see Charles is ahead of Carlos, but this difference will even grow going off the corner because Charles manages to have a smoother, better exit due to a better line. Long straight and the finish of sector 2. Not even the best sector for Carlos Sainz. It was the second attempt in Q1. Sainz actually fall off in Q1. He was P16, and these two tiny mistakes, braking just a little bit later than he should brake, cost him about 0.4 of a second in comparison to Charles and cost him actually a lot. Now we move towards sector 3, we drag Carlos forward once again. Once again he will brake a little bit later, but this time actually he manages to do a good stuff. For some reason Charles misses the apex. Maybe he tried to not even make an apex in this corner, because this corner is actually a V-shaped corner. You can make an actual apex in the first part of your V trajectory, but you never make the second apex out of this corner. But still the trajectory is kind of V-shaped, because we go off, then a little bit towards the inside and then towards the exit of the corner. And now we approach braking for turn 12. Again Charles will brake earlier, so it's a tendency for the whole lap basically. So Carlos will do a bit more of trail braking, braking later. We see he is actually in front of Charles For now he has a higher speed, but Charles is already on the throttle. The same difference in driving style we see in another pair of drivers between Verstappen and Perez, but in Red Bull case the difference is even more pronounced, but tendency is quite similar. Earlier rotations by Charles and Max, going on the throttle earlier, turning in a bit later, it all speaks on behalf of an oversteery style of driving, while trying to win everything on entry of the corner, while this picture with some early entrances with going on throttle later speaks on more sort of understeery style of driving, in case of Carlos and Checo. Now, we move on, and here we see a two pedals technique from Charles, but if we look on a Carlos, we may conclude that braking here is actually not needed. But still, besides it, a small snap of an oversteer from Charles, and maybe they even have a different setup, with Charles' setup being more oversteery, which costs him in this sector 3 because the camber down here is negative since the rebuild. Car is prone to oversteer in this corner, and Charles faces some tiny oversteer. And we approach the last corner, the only corner where drivers were braking in exact same spots. Now Carlos is a bit ahead, but he already goes off the throttle, and Charles will go off the throttle in this same spot. So the last corner, they are both making the apex, no track limits violation, and Carlos Sainz manages to win the sector 3 by 1/10, a little bit more than 1/10 of a second, which is still not enough. Everything was lost on a sector 2, everything was lost in just 2 braking zones. 2 tiny mistakes costed him going out of Q1 and position in driver standing in comparison to his teammate. This is it. Thank you very much for your view. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and see you soon.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey,